Okay.
Sorry, I just had some nuts.
They're going to be salt for their nuts.
I had a question about the benefits of volunteering, which on a personal level I find true in my sense. I don't know about the hypertension. But there was an intriguing kind of conundrum in there. Because there was a suggestion that if you were aware, if you were doing it for your own benefit, then it wouldn't benefit you. But then how do you sell the idea based on the knowledge that it will benefit you? You see what I'm
Yeah, yeah, I know. I did actually hear that criticism as well. Well, that's it. It's just like a placebo, yeah.
Fake it till you make it, maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
There's a certain, there's a certain degree. I mean, fake it till you make it is a phrase from the self-development community, and it's really about just starting to behave in the way that this new person that you want to become behaves, and eventually your brain will just realise that's who I am now. You know, so there's, yes, there can be a certain amount of it, even though to a certain extent it would just look congruent as a person, incongruent, sorry. But yeah, how things can benefit you without benefiting you is partly, as David described in his presentation, that the oxytocin is released then, and that does feel good. But also because you recognise that you're not just meeting your needs, and you're actually working to become a better person. You're helping other people. That just inherently feels good. You see their pleasure, and the mirror neurons fire off in your head, and you feel the pleasure that they feel. And it's, that's just universal. As long as those mirror neurons aren't completely killed off by, progressive violence, like what the military does to break people down, so they can rebuild them again into killing machines, effectively, which is very unfortunate. But yeah, that's what I was going to say. If any of you guys wanted to say something.
I don't think I'm really an expert on this, but I think, well, I have done a lot of volunteering. And I think even if you know somewhere in the back of your mind, well, actually this benefits me, the giving, the gifting, that overrides that. And whereas if you go out with the express intention of bettering yourself, oh, if I do this volunteering, I'm a teacher, and at school, there was a long time in Holland, there was this idea that kids had to go out and do some volunteering as part of their way of contributing to society, and they really hated it. But at the same time, when they were asked to help out with organizing and open event, helping out us or helping out something, helping out each other, volunteering to do something for other people, they really enjoyed it. So I think even if I'm getting something out of this, but the giving, the action of giving, that overrides, that makes it more important. I think that takes precedence.
Selfish giving, that's another expression, isn't it? Selfish giving.
Yeah, there's something about the selfish gene, I think I heard about that as well, but it's, Richard Dawkins, yeah. But in the end, it's like giving that it actually is the thing that releases the positive hormones.
Could it be that maybe giving to gain personal benefits, emotional personal benefits, it's adapt because you are getting what you are giving, where you're gaining rewards as there could be economical or like beneficial career-wise or whatsoever, are not the giving of the source that you are giving. So it's what you
It's
give.
Reciprocity.
Yeah.
It's the basic human function
of giving.
of cooperation. Who said it about recognize that humans are by nature, their basis is cooperative. Someone said this, you said that,
There's a thing of self-altruism. At the end of the day, we as social beings, we draw pleasure for helping someone else. But as long as you're not doing it just for the pleasure itself, but because of the action itself, then you're going to get both the positives and you're going to help someone else. So yeah, at the end of the day, you might, after a whole day of volunteering, go home and be like, damn, I feel good, I'll do this again. But during the action itself, if you're helping because you want to help them, that's more than you need. The lady on Yeah.
I have a question. This is for David, organizer. Yeah, so I was wondering, like, I'm new to this movement, and I went to the one meetup, and there were only very few people there. I mean, not few, but like maybe 6 or 7 of us in that meetup. And I noticed, like, on the meetup, there are loads of people, like over 1,000 people are registered. So I'm curious, why is that? Why is there only so very few people that attended that one meetup that I went to? Because I really feel this is a really valuable idea, and I would like it to be a bit more popular.
Yeah. Oh,
And
sure.
one question for you is, like, because before you were saying giving is receiving, what would you like the people here now to give in a real, like, to give, or how would you like them to take part, or to, what is it, like, contribute? Yeah, in a real way, not
Yeah.
like, not the way that we're showing, like, social media, not the fake way, in a real way.
Well, I think we could all sort of answer to that question. So your first one regarding meetup, I've actually been to 2 or 3 meetups, and they all have the exact same problem. A lot of people just join, go once, and you never see them again.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. That's why there's, I think, is it nearly 1,000 now on Meetup, or is it 700, something like that. I take part in a couple of groups, and it's exactly the same problem. So there's nothing new there, but I mean, people, come in regularly. I mean, we do have the regulars, and we have people coming and going, but I think to keep people coming, you just got to make it interesting, fun, exciting, and just make it just interesting enough for people to come back, and inspiring enough. And I think we do need people to sort of inspire others. And but yes, it's a big question. What keeps people coming. Your second question regarding what people can do. Well, I think there's one thing I think all of us could do, and I think if we could just do a little bit of activism just once a week, just 1 hour. Can you imagine if everyone in this room done at least 1 hour a week of activism, sort of strong sort of work? And all that work would just add up, wouldn't it? It would be quite incredible to do. So, I think that's one thing we could all do. And that activism can just be something like creating content. That's one of the biggest things. Is a topic that interests you and that you feel like you can expand upon and tell other people in a unique way that appeals to a certain demographic. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I thought from experience just in another chapter up in Glasgow in the UK, seeing a lot of activity dip down in that, and it seemed to me that there was initially a lot of I suppose leadership from some of the young people around student communities within the city there, say when the Zeitgeist movies first came out, and then a lot of people sort of dispersed from that generation as it was, and it seems like there is a critical mass that you need for any little organisation to keep going. So if there aren't enough within a particular city for you to have your critical, say, handful of people who are always motivated about a cause and will keep a group going, that might not happen. But some of the successes that I've seen within some of the transition network, the transition towns movement, has often been projects where they have something that they set up that's ongoing, whether it's a community garden or something where there's a physical site that people can regularly meet and work on something. I think you need to find what aspect of changing the world means most to you, whether it's around your food supply or how you get things or share with your neighbours or how you interact socially. You need to find some project that you really believe in and find some people who want to work on that with you. And yeah, as long as you've got a project you can work on, it'll keep a few people motivated going. And I think we've had too much resistance to, say, setting up charitable organisations and small bodies. You need to find out what you need to do in terms of setting up small committees or constitutions. It's not as difficult as it sounds. There's a little homework to do, but it can really help to keep something going. And you don't have to worry too much about the famous things becoming corrupt in the end. it doesn't always happen in this kind of organisation.
So there were generally 3 questions, I believe, about the meetup, what we can do, and I missed the third one, sorry. So about the meetup, yeah, so I would say that one of the big ones about the meetups is that when you go there, you don't really have a clear thing to do. So for a person to feel engaged, he needs to have clear tasks to do. Because if you give someone a very ambiguous idea like create TZM, and you're like, how do I do this? But if you give him, okay, go for half an hour and speak with this person, go for half an hour and read this book, and now he has clear steps to take in order to get there. So I would say that if we have a more structured action plan in the meetups, all of a sudden more people will be coming because they know what they need to get done next time. And that's probably why we also have so little people, because they don't feel engaged in the activity. I mean, yeah. As to what you can as individuals do, I would say 2 things are the most important. First one, educate yourself. And by that I don't mean read all the heavy books in the library. I mean pick your knowledge and start from what we're giving, because these are very complex and combined works. Peter Joseph does a great job with that. And the second thing, I mean, I agree with them. Activism is definitely there, but I feel that it's more easy to go to your mother, father, friend and talk with them than to a stranger on the street. Hell, if you manage to get you as one person to tell your parents and your family and add 3 people, now it's 4. If each gets another 3 people, now it's 12. I mean, in 2 years we're going to have the whole planet. So focus on learning a bit more, and on the people that are close to you, that really trust you, that don't think that you're trying to trick them in some scheme or whatnot.
I just wanted to mention because, yeah, really, because what I recognize from this, and this is all I'll say, because I also have meetups online, and I recognize this. It's about keeping motivation, and that's why I have to think about your talk about being happy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just my presentation as an answer to that question, why there are so few. But also, there was a thing that I learned about quite recently from Jordan Peterson. It's a phenomenon called the Pareto distribution, and it's basically the reason why on the radio, most of the music that you hear is from a much smaller group of musicians than there are actually musicians that are working in the music industry and putting music out. It's only a very small amount. And one of the things that I realized is that capitalism does not create income inequality. In capitalism, the Pareto distribution expresses itself in a monetary form. And because it expresses itself in a monetary form, the Pareto distribution puts our well-being at stake. So we need a socioeconomic system that does not fall victim to that. But yeah, that's what I was saying. Other than what we can do, I mean, when David was saying, engage in some activism, what that means is think about what your greatest strengths are, your greatest passions, and whatever. Maybe even list them down, and then think about different activist roles that align with those, and you are much more likely to start excelling in those.
Is there like an activist handbook out there? Do you know what I mean? No, really, I mean it like a historical list of actions which people have taken in the past, which could be used as a source of ideas.
Yes, I think it was Edward Norton wrote I think it was a book called The Everyday Activist. And I have a copy of it at home. If you look up The Everyday Activist, it's full of stuff that, I mean, I haven't looked through it in
He's a comedian,
entirety.
by the way. So.
Oh, is he a comedian?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay. But we'll move on to other.
Lenin himself.
Lenin, he had to work for years and years and years and years and years and years and years before he got success. Marx too.
What I was going to say is pretty much covered. Engagement is the key. So, just an example, right? I am in the process, very early stages, but in the process of trying to start kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, program thing type thing where I live in Northamptonshire called Rewilding Kettering, and that is solely focusing to start wildlife, strengthened ecosystem, in particular bees, vital for our health well-being. If every household in the borough that I live, or even the town that I live, could plant a packet or half a packet of wildflower seeds or pollinator attractors, that is a very, very simple way of getting engaged. You can watch it grow. I know it sounds so simple, but it is that form of engagement. But on a bigger scale, Edward, you mentioned, Andrew, sorry, mentioned in the about the tool libraries. That I think is probably one of the most tangible things. Think about what people actually use on a day-to-day basis as well. A tool library, a toy library, a library of things or whatever is going to be a really, really good place to start because it's things that people actually use every day.
Just a quick one on activism. Just enjoy it. I mean, I've done street activism with ZDay in West Midlands since the beginning. I've enjoyed it. I mean, I've probably counted 10,000 people because I ran Occupy Birmingham as well, and we reckon we came across 20,000, 30,000 people, and I had the ZDay and stuff all going. So I've probably touched people, and when they went away and thought about it, but I've enjoyed it. I mean, I like pressing the flesh. I'm a real knuckle dragger. I don't do the internet, and I have backed off it for the last 18 months, but I will go back on the trail and I'll report back if you want me. But I do enjoy it. I think it's great.
Info stills happen somewhat regularly on the South Bank. So they're good things as well. Helps if it's a nice day. Yeah, at the back corner first.
All right. I was just going to follow on from that actually. In a former life, well, meeting like a year ago, I stopped organising something called London Spanish Language Meetup, which is a really, really large meetup. But I think that method of getting messages out to groups of people who want to participate in your group has had, over the last few years, diminishing returns. Simply because that space has become so much more crowded. So getting together a bunch of people based on an email list is not as powerful now as it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And that's one of the fundamental problems. And perhaps one way of dealing with that is what the gentleman just said, is that if you want to engage with people, you might have to consider other ways than just someone has signed up to a thing and therefore they're going to get emails. I barely ever look at my kind of commercial emails anymore, the Gmails or the Yahoos. Partly because it's been so swamped with companies. Every time you buy a ticket, you got emails. Maybe that will evolve with the new data legislation. So some of those people machines that email you all the time, you may not get them anymore. But that is a practical and fundamental challenge to any group which is organized on the basis of an email list where you sign up. And of course, as we know from even today, if something is free and someone signed up to it, they don't feel the same emotional commitment, and so they can flake. So signing up to your email meetup group is really easy. Turning up is a whole other thing. So you have to think about that.
Yeah, it's easy to be a flake when it's easy. But yeah, I spoke to you earlier. I think like what you do is like very fundamental to what we need. Like people discussing all different kinds of things, not just sort of like the things that we discuss, but all the other topics.
I'll hand them out. You can mention.
Yeah. I mean, the guys call themselves, I think it's Truth Circle. But if you really like the idea of like getting together and really sort of like discussing some things, I think these guys are really, really awesome for that. So thank you very much. Yeah. Next question.
Gentleman with a white t-shirt. White back.
Oh, the white.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you guys hear me? All right.
Yeah. If you just speak loud and clear.
All right. So basically, we're in a era right now where we're having a lot of projects of disclosure coming forward, okay, and just the whistleblowing of what is happening. Okay, we're talking about insiders, corporations, and stuff. And Zeitgeist I think, is a brilliant one for the financial corruption. Okay, but aren't you guys like communicating with these other projects of disclosure, or what are you guys doing in those terms? Because this is like a lot of people coming forward with like information that is just blowing our minds.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, we see that kind of behaviour that you referred to as just symptomatic of what this current socioeconomic paradigm rewards, reinforces, and requires. And we think very much like what Buckminster Fuller once said, you don't change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model which makes the current one obsolete. Now, while there is great merit to raising the alarm about issues, what it needs to be then followed up with is the advocation of solutions. So, you know, that kind of, you know, having those discussions is good, because sometimes people need to be shaken by the lapels. You need to wake up. There's so many problems, but it's okay. There's solutions. It's fine. So, you know, I can understand like the frustration of, you know, almost like chicken licking, like thinking that the sky's falling down, unless you realise, no, there is something that can be done. But anyone else has anything? Yes.
And the thing is about all those, you know, revelations and all that exposure and stuff like that, about all these horrible things happening, at a certain point, if it's just only this overdosing on negative information that we get into that, what was that part of the brain called that gets numbs and dumbs you down and that you can't do anything? Yeah, exactly. So the solutions, okay, the solutions that activates the prefrontal lobe, yeah, cortex, and that produces a much more positive. I was thinking about it in Dutch, sorry, and so really. There is, of course, obviously interaction and stuff, but really solutions is the main emphasis. I think the guy there in the corner wanted to ask if something. Did you get a question?
It's just a very simple question. Do you use WhatsApp groups or Telegraph groups? Because they can be quite more powerful than, I think, than email if they use.
We've got Twitter.
We have a Discord server, and we also I'm not sure whether we still do talks on TeamSpeak, or is it just moved to Discord now?
Discord. More for Discord.
All right, yeah. We if you look on for Discord, I think it's a sort of like Zeitgeist Movement.
We should put that on the UK side really soon. We'll do that soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something like that is a very good sort of thing. I mean. When you said that sort of kind of clicked in my head. How come that sort of thing isn't being utilised? I think mainly because most of the people in my address book don't really know about these sort of things, work colleagues and old friends. But yeah, it's a good idea.
I think this is a question for Adam and Andrew. On the point of veganism and sustainability, it seems with I think it's about 5 million advocates within the sort of the movement group. It seems like you've got a captive audience there of people that are willing to sacrifice for the greater good. But it doesn't seem like the Zeitgeist Movement does a great deal towards asking people to make that step. So I'd be interested to see, well, firstly, do we know how many of the wider group are making that change towards veganism, because it's such a simple thing and such a big impact it can have. But I'd be interested to see how many vegans are in the room, for example.
There you go, your answer.
We can't unite back here, that's why I was
So what was the question again? Sorry, the exit.
Do you have an idea of how many people within the movement are vegan, and is something being done within the group to try and educate people on why, not just the sustainability, but the health and everything?
I'm not sure. To be honest, the talk that I did, I said one of the Veg Fest was explicitly aimed at introducing the idea of resource-based economy as a kind of change at the core of an economic system, so that there's so many different angles to come at this from. Well, the demand for cheaper food, let alone cheaper meat, is coming from all angles. From those that 815 million people around the world today are going to bed hungry every night, according to the World Health Organization late last year. Think about then the many, many more that I don't have a number for living on the breadline. The number of vegans in the UK sourced, it has disappeared. 3.5 million survey finds. It's the information I've just been fed.
How is this information being withheld?
So there's demand for cheaper food going all around. This then, I was having a discussion with some of the backers I was sitting with earlier, that it becomes for people in a wealthier financial situation, it can become a choice. There is that possibility for them to choose. But the cost efficiency mechanism is still there in the system, so the same incentive of, well, expending less so you're getting more for yourself, which is the name of the game effectively, is something that affects everything. So there's the drive from those that don't have the luxury of choosing where their need comes from, to the corporations that are then trying to make the money, driving for cheaper costs as well so they can up their profits as well. So that's why I introduced that idea there, and I feel like I've gone off on a tangent that I've kind of forgotten where the original question was going. But the number of vegans, how many people are on board with it? I think there are a lot of people that are kind of, my view, purely anecdotal, seem to be focused on the kind of morality and animal cruelty side of things, rather than, for me, well, obviously both are bad, but for me I think the environmental aspect is the really pressing one.
Can I just say one thing? This 3.5 million or whatever the number is vegans in the country, this is somewhat, if I may say so, you're being a bit victim of black and white thinking here, because there's a huge number of people who are reducing their reliance on animal products, you know what I mean? And they wouldn't fall into the class of vegans, but that's you know, there is a huge sea change in that general consciousness, you know, and stats like that just don't take that into account.
Sure, no, I understand. I would say that 90% of the food that I eat is plant-based food, but that 10% of the time, I will admit, occasionally I do eat some cheese, or if I've gone over to a friend's and they've cooked a meal, it might have some meat in it, or something like that, whatever.
But we don't need to beat ourselves up about that, right?
Exactly.
There don't need to be binary states. There's a huge continuum in between, right?
Exactly, and that's why I mentioned the environmental aspect is by far and away the most pressing one, is that this is where it then becomes difficult to say, ultimately what leads to is the question is, okay then, let's just say a resource-based economy is implemented as proposed by the Zeitgeist Movement or whoever. What happens to meat production and who gets to eat meat? And that's why I've mentioned in my talk then, is that collectively, one way or another, we're going to have to reduce our consumption of meat, simply because we know categorically, beyond any shadow of a doubt, it is very environmentally destructive at the consumption rate that it is. So, does that mean we're going to eradicate it completely? I don't know, I can't tell the future. Should we? Absolutely, yes. Reduce? Of course, absolutely. So, yeah, I agree with your point. Definitely.
It's a greater distribution again.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly, absolutely.
A smaller number of people are actually...
All right, those extremes, and it's being flattened out. Yeah.
Yes, most people are either on their way or substitute.
I definitely agree that I think one of the biggest problems or weaknesses with the vegan movement is this idea of whether you're vegan or not, that it's just a binary thing, and there's not enough talk about just reducing meat consumption, or we need to get away from the identity of things, that talking about eating vegan food and not being vegan itself. But I think one of the biggest changes that we can make to help people along that way is simply with the cost of that there is so much subsidy for meat and dairy production, all this. We need to, campaign on the agricultural policies that we have, and the way they're controlled at the moment is from the EU. And if Brexit goes through, we need to get on the backs of whatever government is going to try and put their own policies in place, and see if we can lead the way on that.
That was going to be my next question, was with Brexit coming in, the irony with Brexit being that the majority of smallhold farmers especially voted to leave, not realising the fact that all of their subsidies come from the EU. So you've suddenly got a population of farmers that are going to be left pretty penniless. So I'm a farmer myself, I'm a vegan farmer now, and the amount of farmers that are going to be left pretty much without a job, because the way in which, especially in the area I'm from, which is in North Wales, the way in which livestock is farmed it's not sustainable. As nice as thought it is to think we can have cattle just roaming the country.
So we need support for other kinds to help people get into different kinds of agriculture.
And just one final thought about this. You asked about veganism being promoted within Zeitgeist. The point is we have to change the system. And and because this is not just an economic system that we're talking about, we're also talking about a change of values. I think the further we get in realizing this, the more people are going to recognize the interconnectedness of life, in which there is no need to say, you have to do it this way or that way. That's what I believe. It's what works.
It's what works.